This episode of Session Sessions is brought to you by the Indiana Association of Realtors.
Next order of business is roll call members. Please indicate your presence when the machine is open. If all the members voted, Tyler, roll.
I'm Earl Harris. Welcome to another edition of Sessions Sessions. We are going to solve one of the greatest mysteries you have never heard of. And that is the word pronounced realtor or realtor? To do that, we are joined by Mark Fisher, who I can already hear his deep breathing from anger. He is the CEO of the Indiana Association of, it's Realtors or Realtor? Realtor. Okay, so you heard it here first on Session. It is Realtor, not Realtors, or whatever other version we come up with. I'm
Realtor.
sorry to cause you stress. We just started the show 30 seconds ago.
Right. I don't mind correcting you.
Well, you're probably going to be doing a lot of that.
No one's going to be surprised by that.
We're corrected a lot on this show.
That's right.
And we've somewhat accepted it.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
No problem. You know, let's jump into it, because we see commercials on TV. We see things where some people just go out and do the whole house buying, selling thing on their own. But there are realtors that are out there that can play a huge role in this. Tell us the role of them.
So a realtor is a licensee, so somebody that holds a real estate license, but that is also a member of the Association of Realtors. And we have what's called a tripartite agreement, which means when you join the local, you join the state, and you join the National Association of Realtors. The National Association of Realtors actually has the trademark on the name Realtor.
Yep.
So not all licensees are realtors. But all realtors are licensees. And what
It's an LSAT question, I know.
Yeah, I know.
What differentiates a realtor?
Is it option A?
What differentiates a realtor from a licensee is that when you join the Association of Realtors, you agree to abide by a code of ethics. And so we have a code of ethics, and we administer tribunals on those code of ethics. So we really are looking out for the consumer. We hold professionalism and ethics in very high regard as a realtor association. But our mission, so we are just the state affiliate or state chapter of the National Association of Realtors, and then we have 22 local associations across the state of Indiana, and we have one statewide commercial board of realtors. And so we have 23 partners across the state representing 21,000 plus members, and basically every community in the state. And so our mission is to advocate on behalf of the real estate industry, advance ethical standards for our members, and we've recently added a line to our mission statement that says we have a duty to advocate for thriving communities for a stronger Indiana, because realtors aren't just in the business of selling houses, but they really are selling their communities. They're the most involved people, as you know, in every community. And so we wanted to make sure that that was reflected in our mission statement as a state association, where we really focus on legal and risk reduction. So we provide that professional standards administration. We provide legal forms, transactional forms to our members, and help reduce their risk. It's a very complicated process to buy and sell property. We provide advocacy in political affairs. So our folks at the State House, we represent those 21,000 members at the State House. We focus on education and professional development. So we own a school. We provide pre-licensing education, and then we provide member benefit continuing education to our members. And then one of the things that we're really excited about is what we're able to do with that data that we now have. We've built a data warehouse. We get direct feeds from the MLS marketplaces. We have a data scientist. We have a kind of a public affairs researcher. So we're able to better inform not just our members, but better inform policymakers with facts and figures and not feels. And so we're doing more stuff like Blake has the Walkability Premium Report. I should say Representative Johnson.
No, we're just Blake and Earl on
Blake and
here.
Earl today.
We've all known each other for a while, but I do hold the office you hold in high regard and respect that office, so I should refer to you as Representative.
At least one person on the show does that.
That's right.
Okay, I have to ask you about something. I'm holding my phone for a reason. A minute. So you just talked about words like ethical, professional, a bunch of important words, following letter of law.
Protecting the consumer.
Protecting the consumer. A minute before we started recording, I received a text from someone asking me if I owned a house, which is not a house I own, but I get this about the house I actually do own and other houses. Help me with the fact that people are texting asking about a house that you or they think you own because they want to buy that.
I get those texts as well. The vast majority of instances where that happens, they are not going to be a realtor. They, in fact, often are times not even licensed to practice real estate. They're called what's called a wholesaler. So they are in the middle of a transaction. They never actually take title. So they've already got a buyer lined up. They'll approach somebody. A lot of times it's very predatory. Wholesaling can be a legitimate business practice. Confidentiality of clients is very key. But in this instance, one of the things we're most concerned about is the predatory nature of wholesaling, which is, hey, I've noticed that you're on a fixed income, or you are behind in your property taxes, or you're delinquent on something. So I know you're probably in a little bit of financial distress. Hey, let me buy your house for you. I'll pay cash for your house. What they're actually doing is not actually taking title. They've already lined up a buyer, and they say, I'll buy your house for $50,000, and I've already lined up a buyer over here for $100,000, and they pocket that equity. It's equity theft. And so while I said it can be a legitimate business practice, if you are not licensed, one of the things that you all have worked on and voted for, if you are not licensed in the state of Indiana, if you send out an advertisement or a solicitation for that property, you now have to have a disclaimer that says you're not licensed. The license activity and activity of practice of real estate is governed by the Indiana Real Estate Commission, but the commission can only go after licensees and licensed activity. And so we had to create a mechanism for the Attorney General's office they have a consumer protection unit that they can then investigate somebody that's not licensed for deceptive business practices.
What, so is he licensed?
Yeah, so I did text through your leadership, do you hold a real estate license? And the person did respond back, are you looking to potentially sell? And then the word yes.
Well, then so they don't have to have a disclaimer. Hey, it could be this, but my guess is that's probably not a realtor. Realtors. Why would you text? Realtors do solicit. They do look for clients. They look to represent clients. They often buy properties. They often sell properties. But they're held to a higher ethical standard than the basis that you see in licensure law.
All right, so you're here for two reasons: wit, charm, and good looks. Second,
thank you.
Second is predominantly your role and how you interface with the legislature, and you kind of talked a little bit about that. But from a practical standpoint, kind of day to day, talk about being in the building, the role the association plays, how you guys kind of maneuver through the system.
Yeah, so I've been a state house lobbyist for 20 years. Actually, this year was
you were 10.
I was 10. Yes, exactly. Thank you. And various roles, but my role at the association and what we advocate for is sound real estate policies. So there's a lot of licensure law, transactional law, but then we are there to promote consumer protection, just what we talked about with the wholesaling, and then getting back to our mission statement, we're there to support the state and support strong communities. So that means we're out there supporting economic development efforts. We're out there supporting talent attraction efforts. We support the Indiana Destination Development Corporation and how they're trying to convert visitors into residents. So we are very much trying to be engaged, not just in the direct practice of real estate, but how do we continue to make Indiana successful? How do we continue to grow our population and our economy? Because if we don't grow our economy, we're not attracting people, and we're losing people, our folks won't have a lot of homes to sell.
Yeah.
So, so that's why we have to be engaged in advocacy beyond just kind of the licensure law or transactional real estate law.
You mentioned talent attraction retention as a piece of that, which I've always appreciated. And our work together, even prior to you being with the Realtors, was around that work of quality of life and all of that. Yeah. One of the big draws that, in conversations around talent attraction to the state has always been about affordability. Yeah. Is Indianapolis, are these still affordable places to live from a national ecosystem?
So when I was at the Chamber in Economic Development before, I used to say that affordability is a component of a strategy. It's not the strategy itself, right? And so affordability is still a big asset. I would say that asset is I don't want to say being eroded, but the advantage is not as stark as it used to be. And so I did come prepared, so I did bring some statistics. But yeah, Indiana is still largely affordable. And affordability is relative. So all markets are local. Affordability is also a function of income. And so we know that we have challenges with incomes as compared to the national average. But still, from a housing standpoint, Indiana, I do not want to minimize the challenges, especially of the first-time home buyer. And we can get into inventory and price challenges. But Indiana, the last month, so we run these monthly reports, average home is $264,000 in Indiana.
Statewide.
That's statewide, right? So again, all markets are local, and it can vary from neighborhood to neighborhood. But in the Midwest, our Midwest peers, the average home price is $321,300. Nationally, it's $422,600. So it is 20% lower, 40% lower than our Midwest peers, and almost half of what the national average is. So we still have that advantage, but that advantage has been eroded and can continue to be eroded if we do not take the issue of affordability. And from our perspective, that is all about inventory. That is, how do we continue to build houses? We have a housing stock that's older than the national average. So while we like to say, if nobody owns that house, nobody wants to claim that house, nobody wants to buy that house, nobody wants to sell that house, and it's just sitting there, is it really inventory? We do have derelict housing, so we need to continue to build. Build new, we need to rehab. We've talked about brownfield remediation and opportunities to bring infill housing, homeowner repair dollars, historic rehab dollars. It's going to be an all hands on deck approach, but we essentially didn't build houses for a decade after the Great Recession. And so while our building permits are up, we're still digging out of a decade of not building. And that distribution of the building isn't even across the state. It's going to be in your metro areas where you have population growth, you have income growth. It's going to be where you have national builders or builders that can build at scale. You get into some of the smaller communities, their hometown builders went out of business after the Great Recession. They never came back, so they continue to struggle with workforce. They continue to struggle with material costs. But I think the legislature has done a lot. We are a market-based organization, but in some respect, there's a market failure because we do know that the most acute shortage in inventory is what we call the missing middle. It's that starter home. It's that true workforce housing. And so the legislature has been pretty creative with the revolving loan fund that allows communities to proactively extend infrastructure, to induce more housing, and then, of course, the READY program that the IDCs run. It's $1 billion that you guys have allocated to the IDC, and they are doing competitive grants across the state. Almost 50% of those dollars have gone directly to housing projects. So that's accelerating development of housing. It is allowing communities to do a good analysis of what they need and then deliver those projects faster.
You know, you're talking about the cost. I want to go back to that part because I'm in Northwest Indiana, which means I'm right across state line from Chicago, which is a big jump. And then I actually have a friend that's in California who's in the process of buying a place. He's looking, and the prices are 4 to 5 times for smaller houses with no property. Right. So we really do have a pretty good deal here in Indiana.
We do. But we need to be proactive in making sure that we maintain that advantage. And we do have a good problem in the state. We're the only state in the Midwest that's growing in population. Now, recent reports have come out showing kind of that growth may slow, and a lot of our growth is because of natural birth rate, but we are getting a lot of people from Indiana or from Illinois. We're getting a lot of people from Michigan that are coming in because of our pro homeowner policies like our property tax caps and our affordability and our economic growth. So we are seeing that growth. While that may slow, that does put more pressure on our communities to make sure that they have the housing stock. Our national economist, his name is Lawrence Yun, he likes to say, no houses, no people, no jobs. And so it is great to see groups like the Indiana Economic Development Corporation move out of their traditional comfort zone of transactional economic development and move into more strategic role in understanding that you have to have high quality of life. You've got to have amenities. You've got to have childcare. You've got to have great housing stock to continue to attract those people to fill the jobs that they're bringing.
So you mentioned that one of the interesting things about the association is that membership kind of cascades up. You've got the local membership, the state membership, the national membership. So I know for locally for MIBOR, the Metropolitan Indianapolis Board of Realtors.
Good job.
MIBOR, a realtor association.
There you go. So I imagine that even amongst those local associations, there are a wide range of interests in how they'd like to see you all advocate at the State House. So, and this is where I'm kind of getting at. Indianapolis and probably the donut counties, the inventory issue is a really significant one, right? In terms of getting people into available housing to help with affordability. There are other communities where population is dwindling in terms of counties running around the state. Are those associations thinking about quality of life and investment in communities to attract more folks to them?
They are. Metro Indy, it's 42% of our statewide membership.
Yeah. Why don't you like Northwest Indiana?
I'm leaving here to go to Northwest Indiana.
Because you've never been there before?
Oh, come on. Northwest Indiana is growing, and you have that population growth, so you do have builders that can build and kind of absorb that population growth. 9 out of 10 homes sold in Indiana are sold in a metropolitan area. That said, the markets that are holding up really well right now are our small towns and rural markets. And that's, I think, part of it is as prices rise in those metropolitan areas, but also with the advent of the super commuter. So you have people more willing to drive longer distances to access work, especially
because of great podcasts.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Especially if they are on a hybrid or remote work. Right, They have the opportunity to go out so they can get more home, more land for the dollar. It might match their desired quality of life a little bit differently. But those markets are holding up a little bit better from a sales perspective, where we're seeing a drop statewide year over year of 7%. So we talk about inventory and supply and demand. Even though we're down 7% from last year, which was down 14% from the year before, last year prices were up 5%. This year we're up 4%. So that tells us, well, we can have conversations about down payment assistance programs, and we want to help those first-time home buyers. By the way, Indiana Housing Community Development Authority has a great program for those. We really need to focus on delivering more inventory, because if the sales continue to drop and the prices are still going up, that tells you that we have a market imbalance.
I don't know if this happens. I'm going to go back to something you said in terms of helping people get into homes. My home city of East Chicago has a support system for if you buy a house in East Chicago, you get this much money, or if you build a house, you get even more. And if you're a city employee, you get an additional, I think, $5,000 on top of that.
So local communities are getting really creative. They're working with groups like Make My Move to think about how they attract more people, really inventorying their assets, what differentiates themselves. We've kind of stepped up. We have so part of our dues that we collect from members, $5 of that goes into a fund that we then turn around and support local placemaking grants, planning grants. We use those dollars to leverage more grants from the National Association. So really, we help those local associations access those grants, not just from our state level, but national level. But everybody's thinking about housing. You can go to big cities, suburban communities, ex-urban, rural, small towns. Everybody's talking about housing. I just was up in Fort Wayne yesterday. They had a housing summit. They got the Northeast Strategic Planning Council, I think is what it's called. Every county was represented. Their economic development corporations were in the room, and one of the economic development professionals said, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about housing. We were talking about highway access, and we were talking about tax rates, and we were talking about our workforce. Workforce is driven by and housing are intertwined, and so he said, now everybody's talking about housing.
It's if you're going to play a realtor on a sketch comedy show, you probably just go location, location, location over and over again. So, but the reality is there's so much more to it than that. And you shared this report here on the Walkability Premium. I obviously live in downtown Indianapolis. Big reason I love that is the ability to walk to parks and restaurants and amenities to different entertainment. How are you seeing this play out in terms of market forces?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we're able to do with our data and with our team, our research team is look at where communities are being very successful in providing new housing, attracting new residents, seeing their assessed valuations grow, which helps their budgets, right? That is why we produced this Walkability Premium. We did a metro housing summit up in Fort Wayne this summer. Last year we did a rural housing summit down in French Lick, and we're going to move around the state and look at different topics. But we wanted to show communities that if they invest in density and they invest in quality of life amenities, they're going to reap the benefits of increased assessed valuation, increased residents coming into their communities, and that's we wanted to produce that. It's called the Walkability Premium. Are you able to walk to your coffee shop? And this, by the way, this isn't just for large cities, right? There are communities across the state, small communities, thinking about how they rebuild their downtown, how they bring housing, how they reuse some of their old Main Street buildings. A lot of it's going to go to housing, but a lot of it's then the rooftops or the housing attracts more retail, attracts more amenities like coffee shops and microbreweries and the like. So that there are ancillary benefits to investing in density, investing in quality of life, and that it's kind of this virtuous cycle. And that's what we need to reflect in that report, to encourage communities to think about that.
And I think that's a cool thing you put together, because my memories of growing up was when you think about where you're going to live, you thought about what's the school district for my kids. Mm-hmm. And I think now, as you're pointing out, people are expanding out the things they want around their home,
right,
that they don't have to necessarily jump in their car in, but they can walk to.
Yeah.
And it's adding to the pleasure of life.
That's right.
I don't think this is an overly tough or incendiary question, but as you guys think about some of the other things that are within your industry in terms of, we talk about protecting longtime homeowners on fixed incomes or the unhoused population, you all still care about that.
We absolutely care about that, and that's why when we advocate for more housing inventory, we're not just talking about single-family homes. We advocated for the creation of a state affordable housing tax credit, so we can start to leverage more of the federal housing affordable housing tax credits administered by the IHCDA. We need more housing at every price point. And so that's why we're not just focused on the single family home or affluence, but we are ingrained in the communities. I guarantee you, everybody listening here, I think that the stat was like every individual knows like 8 realtors, right? Like it's so like you know a realtor very well, right? And so
should you have recused yourself from the podcast?
I can't be critical. It's tough.
But it's
I'll do it for you.
It is. We have a role to our members are already playing a role in their communities and improving their communities. Our lobbyist Maggie McShane, she's on the state board of Habitat for Humanity. So they're a great partner. We advocated for a tax credit for people that want to donate to groups like Habitat, right, that are building homes. So we do care about these things because we can't just build walls around ourselves, right? Yeah. And so I think you see that. We leave a lot of that to our locals because the locals are closer to the communities. They know the role. But as a non-home rule state, as you all know, we do have a role to play at the State House as well.
Ever since obviously marrying a realtor and having a family with one, it is interesting. Like I notice everywhere I go, community events, all that stuff. It's often realtors are the first people to sponsor those events. Now, granted, there's some benefit. There's an advertising benefit, and you get your name out in front of people. But like they're making those investments time and time again into local community events, into initiatives, and it's a cool thing to see. And you think about other industries where it's that prominent that every single event you go to, there's at least one realtor involved.
Well, think about my area of Indianapolis, my neighborhood, Midtown Indianapolis. It's festival season, so every church and school has like their own festivals. The primary sponsor of every single one of those is going to be a realtor. Yeah, it's uncanny. So because they're invested, right? Yeah. They live there. They're your neighbors. So they're not just monoliths, right?
Yeah. Let's give out some advice. You've talked about first-time home purchasers, which can be an intimidating process.
Yeah.
Words of advice for someone that's going, okay, we've been living in an apartment or we've been living with somebody's parents, or whether it's a couple or an individual, what are the things they need to do to make sure that process goes smooth and they get into a home that they love?
Well, I'm not a practitioner. I want to make clear I'm not a realtor. I represent them. I actually have a master's degree in running associations like this, right?
Is he avoiding the question?
No,
he's getting it.
I'm
he's doing his disclaimer so you don't jam him up when he texts you later.
One is talk to a realtor. They can give you advice. Looking at all the consumer data we know about why somebody uses a realtor, it's risk reduction is number one, right? It is, I don't know what I don't know. And the other one is, realtors always have a guy. do you have a
Yeah.
you know a roofer?
Yeah.
Do you know
Yes.
you know a plumber? Do you know?
I got a
do you
guy
have,
from
do you have a
him.
mortgage guy? Do you have?
Yeah, so I got you a guy.
I got
you a guy.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got you a guy.
And so it's the connections they have. It's their market experts. That's why we're so invested in the data that we're providing and pushing out to our members. So they are the true market experts. And so engage a realtor, but also know what you're looking for. Manage your own expectations. I think that's a big. We had this discussion yesterday up in Fort Wayne. The average home that was built, post World War II was like 2-bedroom, 1 bath, 800 square feet. Thinking of Eagledale here in Indianapolis, right? The first kind of suburban community that was developed, right? But now everybody wants to move into a McMansion, and so manage your own expectations. Know that first home you buy may not be most likely is not the last home you're going to buy. And so you get into a home, you build equity, educate yourself. There's a lot of resources out there. Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership here in town does a lot of home ownership training. If you want to learn about financing and managing and building and managing a budget, there are resources out there, and a realtor can connect you to a lot of those.
I have to share with you, and I'm having a little bit of fun with you, of course, but when I was buying the house where I live, I had a problem, and I remember I called my realtor and said, "Hey, here's the issue. What do I do?" And he said, "You just did it. You called me. You told me. I'll call you back when it's taken care of."
Yeah.
Which made my life a whole lot easier.
Yeah. You wouldn't go into court unrepresented. You wouldn't do surgery on yourself. I would hope not, unless you're in a really bad situation. But you wouldn't go into the largest transaction, the largest purchase of the vast majority of Americans is going to be their home. And you want representation.
And a tool that usually is your first real step towards building generational wealth.
Building generational wealth.
That is the moment, right?
That's absolutely right. And you build equity, and then you level up in a few years. But manage your expectations. Know that first home. I would say that the average time in a home used to be about 7 years. Now it's more like 12 or 13 years. So people are staying in their homes longer. I think interest rates right now are having a big impact, because if you have that sub 4% mortgage rate, you're not, we call it the lock-in effect. You're kind of locked into that low interest mortgage. It'd be a lot more expensive because you don't buy the price of a home, right? You buy the monthly mortgage payment. That's what you're really looking at. And so that's exacerbated our inventory challenges, because people aren't churning through their houses fast enough. And so we're not seeing people. We will see some demographic issues as baby boomers start to age out of their homes, that more inventory can become available, but we can't sit around and wait 10, 15 years for that to happen. We've got a challenge now, and we have to continue to. If we want to continue to grow, we need more housing.
So, Mark, I want to zoom out just a little bit. I mean, you've mentioned that you've been a state house lobbyist for, you said
20 years.
20 years, yeah. Wow.
I know, I was 10.
Yeah, since you were 10, you really launched into the industry quickly.
Had little small suits on there.
So, this is a podcast
a
podcast that dives into issues. We also kind of look behind the scenes a little bit about the way the legislature works. We've had a couple of lobbyists on. Lobbyists get a bad rap, and so. Could you just share with our listeners your perspective? I mean, you wouldn't have gone into a job that occasionally you get some elbows for if you didn't think there was some virtue there. So kind of peel back the realities on lobbying and the role it plays in a legislative process.
One, we have a part-time legislature, right? You all are citizen legislators. You have jobs, you have lives. You come down to Indianapolis, you're probably a little bit more than most, but come down. You live here, but you're coming down for what, 3.5 months to 5 months a year trying to legislate, and then you're trying to study some issues in the summer. The role of the lobbyists, especially, they're different type of lobbyists, right? And I think that took me a good decade to more fully appreciate that you have institutional lobbyists like your universities, right? You have your association lobbyists that are representing something bigger than them. You have your multi-client lobbyists, right? So there are different types of lobbyists, but they're all there to educate. And for the vast majority of the time, highly ethical. Our job is to build relationships and rapport so you trust us. But the minute we lie to you, we're done, because you're going to make sure that everybody knows that person can't be trusted.
Yeah.
So we have to be very forthright, but we also at the Realtors, and I worked at, you and I worked at the Indy Chamber before and Develop Indy. Think about the issues I was working on then, right? It's everything from police reform to Transit was a big issue.
Right.
And by the way, I worked very closely with my board on transit. Why? Because walkability and access to jobs, education, and healthcare. We worked on public health issues. And so you have people out there. One is to educate, and then two, we have a responsibility to advocate on behalf of our clients. In my case, I and my team have an obligation to advocate on behalf of our members. And so first and foremost, members, but we're also the ones that are advocating, as you said, homeowner protection. We're the biggest advocates of the property tax caps, getting people into their home and making sure they can stay in their home because of our great residential property taxes.
You know, Earl, I suspect your experience is the same to Mark's point. You know, the lobbyists that I have the best relationship with not only are forthright and you know, trustworthy and honest in their perspectives, but often they're also willing to share the opposite side of the issue.
Yeah.
And that has always been like a sign as someone new comes into the building, when they're willing to be like, this is what the other side's going to say, and they don't like try to demean it. They're just like, this is what they're going to say, but here's my argument.
Yeah.
I've always respected that a whole lot. Mark's always been pretty good about that. So
Maggie McShane, our senior VP of Government Affairs, is how the first thing she tells her new folks is, you're going to have to tell the other side.
Yeah.
Because if you don't tell it, it makes you seem, you know, is it lying by omission? No. But you want to be able to pre-butt their arguments.
Yeah.
And so you might as well get it out of the way and have a response to the.
And it shows your knowledge of the issue.
That's right.
If you can talk about the other side.
That's
as
right.
well.
That's right.
All right, we are almost out of time, but before we wrap up, we are coming on to the 2025 session. What are you realtors going to be focused on for that?
We're going to continue to advocate for programs like READY. We have a new administration coming in, but from our perspective, READY has been the most transformative housing program the state has put on in recent memory, in generations. We do know that property taxes, we mentioned that prices are up 4% this year. They're up 5% last year, but from 21 to 22, from 20 to 21, they were up 14%. And then from 21 to 22, they're up 12%. So in some cases, you have homes that are valued at 50% more than they were even 5 years ago, so pre-pandemic. And so we're going to continue to advocate to make sure that people can stay in those homes, that we maintain the integrity of our assessment systems. The assessments should reflect market value. But then we're going to continue to drive home inventory.
that's been Mark Fisher, the CEO of the Indiana. Man.
Oof. You forgot about
Edit
the rest
it,
of us again.
edit it. Indiana Association of Realtors. Mark, thanks for joining us. And thanks to all of you again for tuning in. 3 episodes. We're back in business. Thanks for being a part of the listening audience. Leave us a comment, subscribe, contact a realtor. We'll talk to you soon.